This is a meeting of the Capital Outlay Committee. We'll do the introductions. Mark, would you please start?
Mark Kelleher, Finance Committee Representative.
Karen Doucette, Finance Committee Representative.
Rich Larios, Town Administrator Representative.
Martha Donovan, Select Board Representative.
Ann Tucker, Planning Board Representative.
Thank you. And for the audience out there, there are 5 of us. We do have an opportunity for 2 more. Anybody out there that would like to join us as members, please contact the Board of Selectmen or the Town Administrator. And talking about the Town Administrator, he is our guest today. He is sitting in front of me, and I turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and to the members of the committee. Not just because it's Friday, but, you know, there's an air of, I think, festivity coming with the holidays and all that. So I'm thrilled to be the last one to present to you as an applicant. And I know when you meet on Monday, November 21st, we'll close out the program, but I want to thank you all for your efforts, certainly up to this point, and with everything culminating with the joint meeting on Monday evening, December 5th, sometime after 6 p.m., where you folks will meet jointly with Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee to do a full deep dive into the overall plan. So at your meeting on Monday, you will have what I hope is the last best update on the plan and the documentation, and look forward to that process. But to bring it back to today, Friday, November 18th, I have an application that hopefully you have in front of you. And this is an application that was originally submitted for fiscal year '23. And it was an application that was a directive of the Board of Selectmen. And originally it was meant to impact upon Harwich Center. And so the decision was made at both the Capital Outlay, FinCom, Board of Selectmen, and Administration level to hold that out last year. So I'm thrilled to have it back in and can speak to it. But the general concept here is in each of the 5 years, and there would be 2 more years because this is meant to create essentially funds available initially to do design and or scope of service, meaning it's a funding for procurement so that I can start to envision beautifying each of our 7 villages. And originally, this was meant to first impact upon Harwich Center, but I'll give you a spoiler alert. I will not be surprised if when the board talks about this particular application at our meeting on December 5th, that they direct me to focus on Harwich Port initially, and that builds off of a community engagement forum that I hosted last month that talked about traffic and safety concerns. Now, traffic and safety aren't necessarily what we think of when we think of beautification, but the point, as you can see in my benefit statement, these funds, these initial funds are meant to develop projects going forward that beautify each of our 7 villages for the benefit immediately of the merchants and the residents in those villages, and then obviously for the town itself. And so I can certainly get into more in-depth with that, but I would just like to open with that, and certainly ready to take your questions.
So you said Harwich Port, you meant Harwich Center, right? It would change from Harwich Port to Harwich.
No, it was originally Harwich Center, and if I may, because you may recall that during the height of COVID, the board at Selectmen at the time, the town sought a shared streets grant, which is one of the programs that may come to bear in these projects going forward. But this was a specific shared streets grant purposefully to impact on communities that were impacted by COVID. This was at the height of COVID, and it was meant to help businesses expand outdoor table service and things of that nature. So we were able to do a temporary project, and we're able to impact, I think, to some success in Harwich Center. That conversation and process started a discussion with merchants and residents in Harwich Center, and so my report back to the board, my thought was, why don't we start doing this and thinking of it more purposefully for each of the 7 villages? And so the thought was we would build off of that shared streets grant, but given how much time had elapsed and the complexity with outdoor dining and all that, I do expect that the board will say, let's focus on Harwich Port based on the community engagement forum that had some great information.
Quick question, Joe. In Howardsport, is it at where the art show goes on? Is that where the beautification is concentrated, or is it spread out down Main Street?
So generally speaking, for any of the villages, it's meant to be the main thoroughfare or fairs that impact upon that village. So for me, when we talk Harwichport, we could be talking from the Doane Park or the Harwichport post office, all the way down up to and including potentially the harbor, Saquatucket Harbor. So we know that the greatest part of that corridor is Route 28, and so it would look to impact that area immediately. Similarly, for Harwich Center, when you talk about that, we'd be talking, say, from Harwich Elementary through Route 39, so going past that end, and then heading right out towards what we now call the Hollow at Brooks Park. So that would be the concept generally in those areas.
And this is safety and lighting as the first part of this?
It may be. So again, the Community Engagement Forum for Harwichport came out of discussions at the Board of Selectmen level this summer. Some of the licensed establishments and some of the merchants there were concerned, and, you know, it's the problem of being popular, meaning we had a, you know, if I can put my revenue hat on for a minute, and, you know, sort of debase the conversation by talking about money. But we had a great summer season, but with that influx of people, we've noticed that, you know, look, we had a great summer, and we were lucky with the summer because we didn't have any major injuries or issues. But traffic and safety remain concerned, so there are some things we could do in Harwichport to mitigate those issues and beautify at the same time.
And it's also going to take in the new development that's approved to go in?
Right, so we're aware of that project that was approved. I'm never good at saying east, south, west, all that stuff, so I would say on my right, heading towards Chatham.
Empty lot,
Say again?
the empty lot.
The empty lot, correct, yep. And so, being mindful that that project's coming online, those issues of traffic and safety and mitigation and all that are just gonna become greater.
And there were conditions placed on that development related to that.
Correct.
Yeah.
As well there should be, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Lots of discussion about it.
there's tons of traffic down there. Oh, that's good stuff.
I have a question. In, I guess when this was first presented last year, and it was whatever set aside, it was considered a priority 3 and enhancement.
Mhm.
And the way we've been working it is enhancement down are sort of the nice things, the niceties. Has that priority changed in view of where we are today and our cash position or our monetary position?
So I can say that, for me, it has not yet.
Okay.
And this is meant to be resurrected through this process and discussion, and then for the board, at their discussion on December 5th, you know, I'm gonna need more direction from them. Like I said, are we gonna stay with the original villages that we thought? Are we gonna switch it to Harwichport? Is it merely an enhancement, or is it, you know, related to safety and other issues? But as of right now, I don't have any expectation to change it from an enhancement.
Okay, because I read here the town, via the town administrator and the board, have advocated for beautification projects throughout the town. This funding is essential to move forward. So,
And for me, design funding is essential.
okay,
So that's one of the things I talked to the board about, and I think you folks on Finance Committee, you've heard me say it before, everyone's gonna hear me saying it going forward. For any advocate, program, or department head that has a project, the first thing we need to know is, we have to look at it from a procurement standpoint. So if we have this appropriation, so we get the money, what are we gonna do with it? And the model that the Assistant Town Administrator, Megan Eldridge, and I have been developing is to really refine procurement is appropriation for design and consultation, which could lead to construction or implementation, and then follow-up. And so whatever we're gonna do to beautify our 7 villages, we need to have a design concept. To have a design concept, we need this funding. So there is an element going forward that It may not remain under administration, it may become a department or a program where the construction piece comes up, or on direction from the board, it may remain an administration department function.
Have the seven, I'm gonna say 7 villages / 7 projects. Okay, one.
Yep, I think that's accurate,
Okay,
yep.
have they been defined?
No, they have not, and
Has any of them, we're talking about Harwich Port here, is that the first one to be defined?
if the board so determines it. In other words, the original intent of this article was to first impact upon Harwich Center. And so in the conversation, very preliminary, and I want to emphasize that if there are viewers later on watching this, we, the town, did not go into a heavy community engagement discussion for the merchants and residents in that village. And so because we did that for Harwich Port, beautification design can, so some of the things we could contemplate, and again, this is very much back of the envelope. I wouldn't want anyone to take it as gospel in any way, shape, or form. But when we talk about traffic and safety in Harwich Port, one of the things we focused on was lighting. And so we'd be able to bring in that, period piece lighting that we've seen in other towns, that we sort of have, even though it's an old version of it here in the center, to bring lighting into Harwich Port, not just for beautification, but for an element of safety, because there's so little lighting there. And so that's sort of the concept that we're talking about. If we do traffic calming measures, are we doing that with planters or other things? So, that's where safety and mitigation can still beautify in the end. If we do it right, we're accomplishing all three concepts.
And who will take charge?
So it is a directive of the board for me to work on, generally speaking. And so I would be the one responsible for conducting the community engagement forums to talk in those particular villages. I would be the one filling out the procurement materials to begin with. But, when it gets to that construction phase, so-called, I would rely upon direct reports of my staff, whoever appropriate, to be the project leads on that.
Okay. Any more questions? We're here for whatever comes up to follow up on this.
Mhm.
And I'm assuming that this, I'm going to call it, it's going to be an article.
Correct.
I'm assuming it will appear on next week's version.
I thought it already did, but yes, it should.
It's right at the top.
Yep, under administration.
It's your very top line, yeah.
It's on what?
Oh, way up.
It's way up.
Way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you must have,
I've got all
yeah,
my-
it's like a heading.
You go
I've got all my
alphabetically,
notes written
administration's
on it.
first.
I've got all my
You
notes
wrote
written
over it.
out. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Anything else, Joe?
That's my presentation for that application.
Okay, do you have anything else?
No, I think the next thing for you folks would just be to approve your minutes. And again, the closing episode, so to speak, is Monday. I believe you're meeting at 1 PM. And that's when I'll have the most up-to-date plan for the 5 years. I'll be presenting my recommendations on budget. Working with the finance director, I've come to some conclusions on that, so then I just look for you folks. We do have updates on 204 Sisson Road, so that will come first as your discussion,
Oh, that,
and then we'll get into the overall plan and budget.
And when you say budget, you mean how each item will be paid?
How I expect to pay for the plan in fiscal year 2024.
Is it by item?
No, I think what you'll find is I'm doing it by funding source. And the purpose on that is we're looking at more than 70 articles in the warrant. And so, again, this will be a discussion at the joint meeting and going forward with the board as they craft the warrant. But rather than having X number of articles for every project, I'm be looking to group them potentially by similar funding source.
Well, let me, if I may. Each one of these entries, is it considered an article? Because when I'm looking at facilities maintenance, are we actually going to see 10 or 12 articles?
So no, what I was getting to is not necessarily, meaning every one of those projects needs an appropriation and a funding source. So you may remember in years past, there were some articles that said facilities maintenance and repair. There were some articles that related to cable. So working with the finance director and eventually the board, FinCom and the moderator, I think it's more beneficial to say these projects are expected to be funded through this appropriation. Town meeting will still have the ability, if they wanted to divide the question in the article, but in an effort to try to keep that warrant under 200 pages.
So we're not looking at the article in terms of department. We're looking at funding source.
Well, we're looking at it, an article would demonstrate the project by department,
Yeah,
but they would be grouped by what we're looking for the funding source. So there may be free cash, there may be Chapter 90, there may be cable, there may be other funds.
of each article. I'm
That-
confused in
Well,
terms,
if I may,
Yeah.
that's why it'll be on your agenda for Monday.
Okay.
And you'll have information in front of you.
okay, so I'll wait till,
Yep. What I'm getting to is, CPC articles.
yeah, that's the prime,
So CPC articles could be grouped by the bucket of money that we're going through.
right.
Again, when I'm staring down more than 70 articles, and not to get too far afield, having conversations with one of our regional school systems, there may be an appendix that is at least 15 pages. And so rather than recreating a phone book,
Well,
trying to find ways we can pare down.
I'm glad you brought up CPC, because I think probably 5 to 7 years ago, when Mr. Brown had CPC, we would cover every CPC request as an article. And we would sit there going over literally like 15 requests, 15 articles from CPC. Then someone had an idea of lumping together the 15 in one CPC article, and here it is. And it moved things much more quickly.
Well, if I may, and again, not to go too far afield, but I would argue that I'm mentioning this related to my application. There is the concept, you see the board talk about a consent agenda. There is a concept that other Cape Towns use about consent items. And so those are known to be the items that aren't gonna have any debate or discussion. And so the body, town meeting, could take them under a separate category, and someone would say to the moderator, please hold out X item, put that aside. That can also be done with what I would consider to be compendium articles. So you could have a CPC article that has, all of it from open space and recreation, or all of it from.
Every bucket.
Exactly.
Okay.
Town meeting will always have the ability, no matter the manner in which we present the article, to take an item on its own by dividing the question.
Well, we'll see what the result looks like on Monday.
Amen.
Okay?
Yep.
And there any questions? I passed out yesterday through the email, Dan Pelletier's,
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could interrupt to just say that that item is not on your agenda, but it will be on the agenda for Monday, because it gets to funding mechanisms.
which one are you talking about?
The Dan Pelletier email that we got.
All it was a redefinition of what he presented.
He also talked about the funding schemes with, if we're talking about the same email, this was the one where,
Yeah.
spreadsheet, correct,
Okay.
exactly. There's also a mechanism in there where, we've been talking about the whole number, and we have to have the whole number go before town meeting,
Then there's that,
but then it can be reduced by grants and other funding
and that's
sources.
what he shows.
And that's what
Correct.
it shows, yeah.
Okay. So we'll talk about that.
Because that actually is an element that will be coming into play for some of the new project, or the projects updated on the Fulmer Middle School.
Okay.
That we're putting in a total dollar amount, but we know there are grant monies that we may be able to achieve. So we're always doing the gross amount, so to speak,
Yeah,
but we have to account for in the end. So the good news about that is as onerous and large of a number as it is, that's the worst-case scenario.
Okay. So Monday, we can anticipate something new that reflects this?
Correct. In fact, if my day goes well enough, you'll probably get it this evening for the weekend. It would be the updated plan and budget. It would be the new applications related to the middle school. We'll still incorporate the wastewater superintendent's email for discussion.
And.
But you'll bring that big worksheet, because my printer.
Yep, if there's a preference to have the big worksheet, we'll absolutely have
Yeah,
copies of those
Provides one
available.
it is,
Yep.
so please.
Yeah, the good old 11 by 17.
Yeah, I don't have that
And any
capability.
update to Sisson Road?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So there is an agenda beyond voting.
Correct. Yep.
So historically, all the weeks we've been working on this, we've been looking at this as sort of the Bible
Yep.
of what we are looking at and voting on. So the voting on Monday is going to reflect this in a modified version,
Correct. In a final version. So.
modified final version.
Right. The way that I've been saving these documents is as drafts.
Okay,
And so what you'll be getting, hopefully, again, like I said, before close of business, today is what I consider to be the final version of the FY '24 through '28 capital plan and the final version on budget numbers that I'm presenting.
okay, and so we will be able to vote on the final version
Mhm.
and your final numbers, so.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Which are still subject to change
Still
until.
subject to change, still
Until
subject
town
to
meeting.
review, exactly. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions?
How many days till town meeting?
164, thank you so much for asking, Ann.
Therefore, yeah.
Thank you.
Rich, I have a quick question. I probably should have spoke to you beforehand. This is my first go-around. It's like you had some exceptions to some portions of the capital plan. Do you have to vote yes or no on the whole capital plan, or can you take some of the, say like on a 204 Sisson Road, like I've made a mention of the slate roof, it could perhaps be something else. How does the vote go? I've never been through this before. You vote on the whole thing, or do you do it
That's a
by
good question.
portions?
Well, I think there's my thoughts as administrator who's responsible for building the plan, ultimately and presenting it, versus what the chair with his institutional and long-serving knowledge would have. So I can offer my thoughts. I could also defer to you, Mr. Chair.
I'd like to hear your thoughts first.
All right, thank you. So as I mentioned at your last meeting, and again, it wasn't relative to the crowd that was here. It was relative to you folks in anticipation of your deliberation. And it's also tying back to a broader issue that the board will be talking about, and that is the role of committees to advise and inform the board and then through the board to the town meeting. So the plan that you'll see Monday, the 21st, is what I believe should go forward for the town and what I will be presenting to all three entities on December 5th. Ultimately, the plan is what is adopted by the Board of Selectmen by virtue of what they put into the town meeting warrant. And so you folks could say that we don't think it should go there, and I would say I appreciate your input and I'll take it under advisement. But I will have to present to all three bodies in anticipation of presenting to town meeting. So you could take it line by line, you could take it department by department, you could vote the plan for the 5 years. And again, the charter part about, I have to build the comprehensive budget. That's what the charter says that I have to do under Chapter 4, which creates the role that I have, and what it says in Chapter 9 on finance. And so I have to look at all the revenue sources that I see are available right now and anticipate being available. And then it becomes a broader discussion with those three boards, which is my understanding as to why the charter was written that way. There's a reason why Capital Outlay is meeting with the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen in December. And that's for you folks to talk about what you've seen, what you believe, what your processes have been, and what led you to your conclusions. FinCom will ask, I think, similar questions. But in the end, everything we're doing comes back to a warrant that is established by the Board of Selectmen. So I would defer to the chair mechanically, so to speak. You could do any number of motions and votes. That's entirely up to the chair. For me, it's the output. What did we end up with?
Mark and I have discussed this before, so I'm not blind to it, okay? Historically, and I'm not set in concrete, historically, things change, whole new body here. Historically, again, the plan is changing, the way we're gonna be looking at it is changing. In the past, we have taken every one of these entries as an article, okay? My view is we are not experts on when a department head says that shingle should be beige and we're saying it should be gray. If he says it should be beige and the town administrator accepts it as beige, it's their decision. They work it. We're not town employees, we're volunteers. So the issue of shingles and so forth, what my interpretation is the town administrator has to take the input from the department head and base his costs or his funding as that. The vote is, do we accept hypothetically everything that's presented to us?
Right.
That's legitimate, okay? It's like when we talked about briefly visiting sites. Well, we visited sites many years, we started this a long time ago, and we went to a building, and I won't say what department, but we went to visit this building, brand new hardy board, which is concrete, which has the color built in, which they decided to build, which the architect planned, which the builder built, and it was beige, and they were painting it gray. Well, it's got a lifespan of like 25 or 30 years, beige. Why would you, in the first week of it built, be painting it gray? There was a lot of questions from this committee on why this would happen. And even at that time, the town administrator questioned it. I mean, it just didn't make sense. So we get to see things, but we're not responsible for funding it, okay? We approve it. The only vote that you see, as you're gonna see in the warrant, and you all, all went to town meeting, is that FinCom actually votes. And you'll say, you guys got 7 members?
They have 9.
No, we have 9, we're full.
So that's almost the whole town. So you got 9, and your vote will show 9-0, 8-1 on every article. We don't have that input. Oh, we do.
Right.
And if you read the
No, we're gonna vote on the plan though, right?
plan, but not the article.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the plan. We're gonna vote on the plan.
I understand that. I was talking about FinCom, like FinCom.
Oh, I don't care about FinCom. I don't. You
I thought we
vote,
were just talking about FinCom.
I would ask to be recognized by the chair once he's done to offer some more
All
information.
right, I think ahead.
yeah, well, FinCom votes on the plan.
Right.
And they vote on every article. And your vote shows on every article.
Ultimately, we vote on every article, but when it comes to this, whatever, I don't know what the output of the December 5th meeting is.
Sure.
And I think that's what Mark and I are trying to get to, because we haven't participated in this side of it.
You want to tell them what to?
I know what happens on FinCom.
Well, to build on what you were saying, and I should have said it to Mark's question, there will be at least 2 distinct articles in the warrant for 2023 that relate back to the efforts that you've been doing, that we've been doing together, and that will be presented at town meeting. The first is an article, it's basically, it is to adopt the 2024 through 28 capital outlay plan. And so it's Appendix B, you can see the whole plan, and typically that gets adopted, it gets adopted without any discussion, because it's been, vetted by all the parties. What I was trying to get to earlier is the second thing that town meeting votes on, the second, at least second article, if not more, would be an article to adopt and appropriate for fiscal year 2024. So again, the charter talks about the capital plan, which is a 5-year document, and then specifically the budget, and the budget is only for the upcoming fiscal year. So there will be a motion, there will be an article, there would be recommendations by Board and FinCom. Presumably, there would be motions that are made by FinCom to adopt Article such and such to adopt the capital outlay plan for the 5 years. Then there's a discussion on the budget only for the first year. So what that gets to is you could say, yeah, we've talked about the 5-year plan. We know that there's elements of amendments and all that. Let me say that clearer, amendments, and we've talked about that process, but by and large, we're saying to the town, we believe this is the plan for the next 5 years. Go ahead and adopt that. The bigger discussion comes in, what are we funding in fiscal year '24? How are we funding it? And what is the net effect of that? So really, to get back to it, you folks could do a similar process on Monday. You could, you might want to do it in a different order. You might want to do the budget for fiscal year '24 and those items, and then adopt the plan. And
Our-
anything within that.
Our vote in the past, which will be effective Monday, runs differently because town administrator this weekend, what I'm understanding, what he's presenting Monday is, he's gonna show us funded requests.
Right.
And how they're being funded. Prior to this iteration, we, the Capital Outlay Committee, would approve the request and tell the town administrator, now go forward and find how to fund it. We're not doing that today. Joe is taking one step forward and saying, you gave me 70 requests, I'm going to show you 69 or 68 of them that I can fund, and here's the way I'm going to fund it.
Good.
Now, how do you approve of that? That's where our vote is going to count. Prior to that, it was, Joe, we looked at the 70, we think 67 of them are justified. Here are the 3 we don't really care about, just like we talked about the beautification being an enhancement. Well, if it didn't have the backing of those advocates, we'd probably say that's 1 out of the 70 that we would drop to the bottom. But we've got to, reach some kind of agreement of where do we put that enhancement request. That's purely an example.
Mm-hmm.
So the new way of doing it makes a lot of sense to me. Joe puts in the time and says, I got all this money, I've got 5 buckets, and here, these 5 buckets are gonna fund the 70 requests that we have.
And
Close, not the full plan, and we've done that in years past.
Budget,
Correct. Correct, the budget.
budget year.
Correct.
That's what we're voting on,
Correct.
yeah.
So 70 projects, I don't think covers fiscal year '24.
Whatever the
Maybe,
number
you're
is.
right, 70 in the plan.
Whatever
Yep,
the number is
Right.
for the budget,
exactly.
That's
Yep,
for the budget year.
correct. Yep,
That's the one we're really concerned about. That's the one that's gonna be in the warrant. But the whole plan turns out to be in the warrant too.
right. And if I may, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
to your point, come Monday, if I reported that after research with the finance director, that we're not able to meet our funding needs for the plan, I would make recommendations on you folks about what I think we have to take out.
Exactly.
Yep. I do not believe we're at that case for fiscal year '24, though.
We did that last year, and then we put some back in, like we
Yep.
kind of went
Yeah,
all
the
in.
effort this year for having you folks start so early is to try to get as close to end result in December.
Yeah, we went
and
all
not
in
have to
last
revisit.
year, and then not we, but the board took a bunch of stuff out, these guys took a bunch of stuff out, and then when they analyzed funds again, or source funding sources,
Right.
some of that stuff went back in, but.
Right,
And at the end of the day.
not my preferred method.
And at the end of the day, what finally goes to the finance committee and as a warrant could be totally different than what we approve, because the select board could change everything, right? Like, we don't have any say in that.
No,
Oh,
good.
I agree with that, but I also don't want to neuter this committee.
No, I
To
think
me, the
we.
great value that you've done is the five of you over the last several months have heard from my colleagues, and you've questioned them better than I would have. And we get good dialogue that comes out of that. And so that's the way I look at it. And Ann, you had mentioned it before, that, you know, when it comes to town meeting, there is no longer the capital outlay committee, but you have the right to speak, and you can offer your own insights on the plan. Because you were the folks that were first going through that process of evaluation and discovery.
Yeah, we should be advocates for whatever we decide. or
I would always hope
recommend.
that, but if there's a difference of opinion, what I'm saying is you have the right in the very end, as town meeting members, to offer your thoughts.
Sure.
Not at the risk of negating what the committee did, but just say, this is how we talked about it.
Exactly.
so let's assume we get past Monday, which I have no doubt we will, but on December 5th, is there an expected output or conclusion to that? How does that go?
So this year, I am hoping that whatever germinates for discussion for Finance Committee and Board, because they have not had this element of discovery, that if nothing else, that the board say, okay, we'll take it under advisement. We'll bring it back perhaps at the meeting on December 19th for the board to say, this is what we want the capital plan and budget to be going forward. Or they may say they'll take a more definitive position on that, say, in January. But in the end, after that, both Board of Selectmen, as the chair has said, both Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee will be analyzing the articles that emanate, like I said, the plan article and the budget article or articles, plural. And then you do a deeper dive into that after December 5th.
After December 5th?
Yep.
Our work is done after December 5th, correct?
Our approval and recommendation is done in terms of the charter,
In terms of the charter?
okay?
Yes.
It stays as a living document until town meeting.
Got it.
So until that afternoon, that night, or 5 minutes before, it's happened before, where capital outlay has to get back together again
Okay.
and readdress something.
If I may, exactly, Mr. Chairman, the information I gave out on Monday, 952 of the charter that talks about the budget says that the administrator may ask, or the board may ask, this committee to assist in the budget. So that's one of the things that could come out of the meeting on December 5th. And that matches with the concept under the charter.
Do we need to present anything on the 5th, or is that all you?
Technically, it's all me and Mr. Chairman.
So what do we need to prepare?
Nothing.
Nothing other than you've got your notes and, you know,
Okay,
you're gonna be active in the dialogue.
That's fine, yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
But you guys are gonna be sitting in FinCom.
Yeah, that's fine. And no, I just wanted to know if we had work to do, because
No,
it's coming in.
no, you've been doing the work and we've been amassing, that's,
Yeah, I
yeah.
saw,
Other than we
I
need a
pulled,
quorum.
I pulled a report from 2020 that was like it was like a capital outlay actual report, written report. And I didn't know if we had to put something like that together that,
We've met this many times, we've done.
Oh,
this.
no, it
Was that
explained-
from the annual report?
no, I just looked online and it's on a capital, a webpage, there's two capital reports on the left. One is
That's mine.
one's a written report and one's just like this. So the old one is, think like this, the more recent one is a written report of all.
But I think the narrative is what the chairman has to provide for
Once a
the,
year.
for the annual town
Oh,
report.
this was,
State
sorry,
of
this
the
is
Union.
old.
It's the State of the Union that I write.
This is?
Caleb, any chance you have an annual report over there?
Hey, this is,
Can I see it?
Books.
but I was just curious, if we don't have to do that, I'm happy.
Sometimes use it
He's
to
already done it for this year.
put up projections.
No, I know, this seemed to me not
Something
the
different.
same, yeah. I know what they're talking about, the annual
Yeah,
report.
this is what I write up in the State of the Union.
Okay, cool.
I have to do it once a year, and it becomes smaller and smaller.
Yeah, well, that's what I've noticed too, but that's fine too. And I have one more question, if you don't mind, Joe, because this is.
No, this is exactly what we're doing.
I've been I should, because I don't have a life or something, but I've been looking at annual town meeting warrant booklets from 2016. I had a purpose, but, so I looked at the ones from 2016 on.
Yep.
And what I did notice is that most of them have a warrant article for capital less than 50 grand. And I would like to know where that went and what's going, I know it's not, it shouldn't probably be capital, but what happens to all that stuff that used to be shown that's less than 50 grand?
So as we've gone through the process, first, that's one of those many items that when you compare practice to what the charter actually says, capital, so the definition has always been there and always been wrong, but it was a threshold of 50,000.
Right,
So by its very nature, if there was something less than 50,000, it should not have been called capital.
I agree.
And so for any of those items, I think we will find them as in the operating budgets, if they exist at all. So again, that sort of goes back to, and it's not lost on me.
Thinking that, I just wanted to.
Yeah, when you're looking at the 2016, so if it's the calendar year 16, that's the fiscal year 17.
Yes, that's
town
what I
meeting,
did. I looked at the,
18 and 19. And then 19 is when the bylaw charter review started to impact upon the plan as it relates to the charter. And so that's where it sort of went haywire. So then I come in, and that's what the chairman and I can speak to. We've been trying to correct and refine how we do that going forward.
that's what I figured. I just
Yeah.
wanted to, I had to ask.
Because for what it's worth, the finance director and I had a great discussion yesterday about what capital should be going forward. And her threshold and my threshold were about 65 grand apart. But then we're talking different language, we found. But, not to go too far afield, Mr. Chairman, we've talked about the bylaw charter review process, we've talked about the charter itself. I am, separate from what you do, would be talking to the board about potential charter amendments, and really, for our process going forward, to be called the Capital Improvement Program, CIP, and have it mirror what the Department of Revenue says is the best practice. And that's because this town was good to create a capital plan, but then it never really synced up with what the auditors and what the Department of Revenue would really want us to see us do. And so relying upon what's been done in the past, struggling through some of the errors that were in there, I am hopeful, it may not be for this town meeting coming up in '23, but that we as a town say, hey, this is what is meant by capital, this is the process, and this is the program.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that document, Karen, is from 2014.
I think, okay.
It's kind of old.
No, I know. Like I said, I was going back and.
Yeah, no, that, historically, I mean, you did your research, and I probably have that.
It's on the, just as an FYI, we have that and some other miscellaneous document on the left side of our webpage.
On
that I
the
would-
committee page,
Oh, yeah, I'd get rid of it because it's right at the front and that,
Yeah,
to me,
there's
those are,
there's a
I've
requirement.
actually never gone to it because I never thought to go to it, but I can check it out if you
just
want.
look on the left and there's just two, it says capital reports and those are the only two things that are there. I would probably push us to that
That was
link
one of my
that
best,
Ellen sent me, which was good. It had all the accessible
that's one of my
warrant,
best
ATM
documents.
booklets. Sorry.
That's one of my best documents, so you may want to keep it, okay?
I've got a hard copy, so I'm happy.
I'm really
Get
glad.
it autographed by the author.
Yeah, that's when we had a full committee, and you had every department, every chairman of a committee
It's in one of mine.
goes in front of the board and does a State of the Union. And I did a State of the Union, but I didn't show up to do the State of the Union. But I was the only one to submit a State of the Union.
And the board was actually
I
kind
got
of pleased with
kudos
that, so
for
he
it.
got credit.
They didn't want to see me, but
Less is more.
I did the document. That at hand, the other thing on this bylaw change, and I think that's something, I know we go into this hiatus. What do we do after everything's submitted in December and January, met all these dates? That's a real good time, especially during the winter. In the past, our members, I was the junior in age, so you could see how bad things were, okay? I was the youngest, and everybody else out of the 7, bye-bye to Florida and South Carolina, So we just went on hiatus.
Okay.
I offer, and with the town administrator's approval, that it's a real good time to catch up on issues that we know may impact next year
Absolutely.
and the coming town meeting. So that I don't want to shut it down where we have in the past, only because people are not here, to get some issues resolved, okay? The other thing is the bylaw changes. I really want this committee to look at how it affects the way we operate. Because everything that changed in the bylaws that affects capital outlay committee was never vetted through the capital outlay committee.
Oh, got it.
So we are operating currently under what we've been told is correct. And no one has had the ability. Joe and I have attended some bylaw change, or the bylaw committee, whatever the hell it's called. And we should have some input, like this 50,000 as a number. Okay, prove to us, well, it should be anything less than less than 50, 50, greater and equal to 50, you know.
I suspect the bylaw committee is gonna, or whatever they're called, that group, there's the whole bunch.
there's-
Bylaw Charter Review.
Charter
Committee.
Review
Yep.
Committee is gonna review, present, and maybe it's an assumption I'm making, to each of the committees if they're gonna drastically change their.
No, that's
No,
not a good assumption,
Well,
because
if they were gonna change the Finance Committee charter section, I would think they would go to the Finance Committee.
well,
And not to ask for our,
Blessing.
we don't get to write it, but I would suspect that they would at least,
well, that's a good assumption, but that's,
are
It
you on
hasn't
that
hap-
committee?
no, he is now, aren't you?
Nope.
Oh, no,
There's
No,
only
but
one
we have
committee
two
I serve
people
on.
in the Finance Committee that are on that committee, and my point is that any changes that are gonna come, I mean, it would be silly to go and make charter
It is silly.
changes.
thank you, that's what I'm saying, that's what
That's
I'm
what
addressing.
No, and that's why I'm looking at
That's
Joe.
what happened.
That's what happened.
I know, that's why, but there's a whole new committee, and that's, I'm
No,
assuming.
it's not a whole new committee. Still,
It's
not, oh
really
God,
not.
I mean, it's still.
Whoever
the
it
sa-
is, like, we should
Oh.
make sure that they are transparent
Correct,
before they get
correct.
done.
And because we are going too far afield on your agenda, what I heard the chairman say and what I'd like to do, I put it in my notes. When you finish your process in December, that the five of you find a date that works, and I'd be more than happy to, I've already done it, but the chairman and I presented to Capital earlier in your cycle, and the bylaw charter review, and I don't think you were here, so I have to get that to you. My thoughts on the capital outlay program. And I offered my thoughts because the charter says that I have to build a plan and a budget. And so I told them that the efforts in years past, that the chairman can speak to better than I, where a committee made article and recommendation changes without the input of the capital outlay committee, we're still dealing with the effect of that.
Oh.
So the present bylaw charter review committee is aware of the thought process that I have, and what I told them is when you folks were done with your actual work, so to speak, that the five of you could engage in a meeting process to have a dialogue about what capital should be going forward. And they're willing to accept that after that meeting. So there could be a joint meeting sometime in the future between Capital Outlay Committee and Bylaw Charter Review,
Makes sense.
with yours truly there as well, talking about what do we want the plan, what the program to be.
Who does
going
final
forward.
sign-off for the charter changes? Board?
Board for the articles, but town meeting. Town meeting, and then a year later, the town through a town election.
Yeah, so well in advance of that, somebody ought to be asking them questions about who did you review?
Correct.
Who did you
That's-
work with on this?
That's our
Yeah.
winter work, it
Got
seems
it,
like.
got it.
If you're willing to do it, absolutely, it's
Helps.
God's work. Yep.
That helps, thank you.
We would have some input that would affect us. That's my,
That's good.
we don't have, we've been invited to sit with them, at least once, me.
Mhm.
And it was very cordial, and it was anticipating that this committee would have input in the future. Historically, we had no input.
Yeah, I get that.
And we're
Issue.
living with the result of no input.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't want to carry it too far, but we're ready for Monday, 1 o'clock. I should be here.
Adopt your minutes.
So can
Uh,
I make a motion to adopt
You could, yeah.
minutes of November 7th, 2022, with one edit that I will provide, a typo that I will provide to Joe?
Thank you. And do I hear a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
Can I make one comment before we close?
Of course.
So I want to do it on the public record. Joe, the harbor master gave Ann and I a tour yesterday of the harbors and the facilities and the projects, and it was incredibly helpful. He was gracious and very informative, and we really, really appreciate that. So please pass that along to him.
I'm not surprised to hear it, but I'm grateful to hear it, and I'll certainly pass it on to John and the team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if anyone on the committee wants to do any kind of site visit while there's no snow on the ground,
Yeah, yeah.
Act now.
just let me know. We can arrange it. Martha's
I'll be
got
the
a little,
coordinator.
she's got a little cap that says captain on it.
This way, please.
Thank you, and we'll see you Monday.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Aye, aye.
All in
Aye.
favor?
All in favor?
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Caleb.
Thank you. So this is